June 25, 1941, near Minsk. On the dusty fields of the Western Front, the air hung heavy with the smell of diesel and churned-up soil. German tanks like Panzer II and I rumbled eastward, their grey hulls glinting under a blazing summer sun. Around them, columns of infantry trudged confidently through the ruins of smashed Soviet defenses. Operation Barbarossa was only days old, and already the Wehrmacht had cut through hundreds of miles of Soviet territory, like a hot knife through butter. In one column, Feldwebel Karl Metzger leaned out of his Panzer III's turret, smirking as he watched a row of burnt-out Soviet T-34 and BT-7 tanks littering the roadside. Their thin armor was shredded, their turrets twisted open like tin cans. "Is this all they've got?" he shouted over the engine's roar to his gunner, Otto. Otto chuckled, shaking his head. "They call these tanks, they're museum pieces." The men laughed. Across the column, the mood was the same: cocky, victorious, unstoppable. German propaganda had painted the Red Army as a disorganized, backward force, and every encounter so far had proven it right. The Soviets fought bravely, but their equipment, especially their tanks, looked ancient. The BT series were fast but fragile, their thin armor no match for German 50mm guns. As they advanced deeper into Soviet territory, the landscape changed. Forests thickened, roads turned to mud, and the horizon stretched endlessly eastward. But still, morale stayed high. Every destroyed tank and abandoned Soviet position seemed to prove the same point. The German Panzerwaffe was unmatched. That confidence echoed through every radio transmission, every soldier's grin. The German army had perfected blitzkrieg speed, precision, and coordination. Against such a force, the Soviets couldn't possibly stand for long. Then came the reports. At first, they seemed like rumors, frantic radio calls from forward reconnaissance units, stories whispered among armored crews during quick refueling stops. A new type of tank, they said, one that didn't burn when hit, one that could shrug off shells that tore through anything else. "Nonsense," Metzger muttered when he heard it. "Probably some damaged BT-27, someone misidentified. The Russians can't build anything we haven't already outclassed." But that evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line and the column halted to rest, a lone Panzer III limped back from the front line, its armor scarred and pitted. Its commander, blood trickling from his forehead, shouted as he jumped down from the hatch. It fired back after 3 direct hits. He yelled, his voice trembling. 3 hits, and nothing. Our shells bounced off. The laughter died. No one spoke for a long moment, until Otto finally broke the silence. "What kind of tank was it?" The commander looked up, still breathing hard. "A new one. We hit it point blank. It moved through the mud like it was nothing, like some kind of beast." That night, the laughter that had filled the German camp was replaced by low murmurs and uneasy glances toward the dark horizon. Something was out there, something new, and it was coming for them. June 26, 1941, near the Berezina River, east of Minsk. At dawn, the forest came alive with the distant growl of engines. A light mist clung to the treetops. The sun, a dull orange disk behind the haze. Feldwebel Karl Metzger squinted from his Panzer's hatch, listening. It wasn't the usual sputter of Soviet trucks or the high whine of their BT engines. This was deeper, heavier, rhythmic. His radio crackled. Forward units, reporting contact. Unknown Soviet armor advancing through the woods. Thick frontal plating, thick plating. Metzger tightened his grip on the turret rim. "Otto, load armor pier. Let's see what these monsters really are." The Panzer column fanned out into the field, forming a line along the ridge. Ahead, the forest edge erupted with muzzle flashes. Soviet artillery barked, shells tearing into the soft earth around them. The Germans returned fire, confident as ever, until a dark shape rolled out of the smoke. It was unlike anything they had seen before. Sloped armor glinted under the morning sun, deflecting small arms fire as if it were rain. A broad, powerful turret swung smoothly toward them. The machine moved with eerie grace across the mud, not lumbering, but gliding. Otto's voice cracked through the intercom. "Target sighted. Range 400 meters. Fire." The 50mm gun boomed. The shell screamed across the field and sparked harmlessly against the enemy's armor, ricocheting into the air. "What?" Otto shouted, fumbling to reload. Direct hit, no penetration. The Soviet tank answered with a thunderous roar. A 76.2mm round slammed into a nearby Panzer III, tearing through its hull in a single devastating impact. The explosion rocked the field, black smoke billowing skyward. Another one. Left flank, shouted the radio operator. Two more emerged from the tree line, their wide tracks devouring the mud, their guns firing with terrifying accuracy. Metzger's crew fired again and again. Sparks, ricochets, nothing. The shells bounced as if they were hitting stone. Pull back, Metzger ordered. Fall back and flank from the tree line. But even as his tank reversed, the Soviet machine kept advancing. Its engine howled, a deep, throaty rumble. Unlike the sharp whine of German diesels, it crushed fences, tore through small trees, and powered forward like a beast from another world. For the first time since the invasion began, German tank crews felt something they hadn't known since Poland. Fear that Soviet formation rolled closer. Their new tanks each bearing the red star cutting through the German line with unstoppable momentum. Metzger caught a glimpse of one side profile through his periscope and gasped. The angular armor, the slanted hull, the way it shrugged off everything. "This isn't a BT," he muttered. This must be the T-34. The radio filled with chaos, requesting air support and known Soviet armor-heavy casualties. They're impervious to 37 and 50mm rounds. Repeat, house shells can't pierce them. In the span of an hour, the unstoppable blitzkrieg had stalled. Metzger's Panzer retreated behind a low ridge. Smoke rose from the valley below, burning wrecks of tanks, both German and Soviet. The once confident column was now silent, the crews staring in disbelief. The laughter from the day before felt like it had come from another lifetime. The Soviets had unleashed a weapon that defied everything the Germans believed about warfare. A tank that could outgun, outlast, and outrun their finest machines. The T-34 had arrived, and the German army would never be the same again. June 28, 1941. The outskirts of Borisov, Belarus, the once steady rhythm of the German advance had begun to stutter. Reports flooded in from every front. Soviet armored divisions once thought shattered were counter-attacking with a new breed of machine in a small clearing beside a smoldering village. Feldwebel Karl Metzger leaned over a map laid out on the back of his Panzer. Around him, his men smoked in silence, faces grey from exhaustion and disbelief. "We hit it with everything we had," Otto muttered, kicking at the dirt. 50mm, close range. It just shrugged and kept coming. "What are we supposed to do, throw rocks?" Metzger didn't answer. He stared at the terrain map, tracing his finger along the road to Smolensk. The orders were clear. Press on, no matter what. But how were they supposed to advance if every engagement turned into a massacre? A motorbike roared into camp, its courier waving a dispatch envelope. "Command orders," he barked, handing it off. "They want field intelligence on the new Soviet tanks immediately. If you can get a damaged one, capture it." Metzger gave a hollow laugh. "Capture one? Maybe they can tell us how." Still, orders were orders. That evening, under the cover of fading light, Metzger's platoon crept forward again. The forest was silent, now no birds, no wind, just the occasional hiss of burning fuel in the distance. Ahead lay the battlefield they had fled 2 days earlier. Charred metal and twisted steel covered the plain. Half-buried tracks led away toward the east. They found one T-34, immobilized but not destroyed. Its track had been blown off by a mine, but the hull was intact. Its armor pitted from dozens of glancing hits. Metzger climbed up cautiously, brushing soot from the turret. The metal felt thicker than anything he'd seen, sloped at a perfect angle, welded smooth. "Mein Gott," whispered Otto, running his hand along the side. "No wonder our shells bounced." They pried open the hatch. Inside, the smell of oil and gunpowder filled the cramped space, for burnt-out shells lay scattered on the floor. But the rest of the interior, simple, rugged, efficient, spoke volumes. The Soviets had built this machine for war, not comfort. "It's not fancy," Metzger said quietly, "but it works, and it's built for these conditions." He looked out over the muddy ground beyond the wreck. Their own Panzers had sunk and struggled here, but the T-34, with its broad tracks and powerful diesel engine, could roll through it like dry road. When they returned to camp, the engineers and officers were waiting. They took photos, measured armor thickness, and shook their heads in disbelief. Word spread quickly through the battalion, through the regiment, through the entire division. By July, everyone knew the name, T-34. Some called it the ghost tank, others, the steel storm. Across the German lines, the mood began to shift. The confidence that had carried them through Poland and France was cracking under the weight of something new, something that Reich had not prepared for. Messages from panzer commanders arrived at headquarters, each echoing the same urgent warning: our weapons are ineffective. New Soviet tank, superior to all current models. Recommend immediate redesign. All current models. Recommend immediate redesign. But redesigns took time the Germans didn't have, and as the front stretched deeper into the vastness of Russia, the mud thickened, the supply lines groaned, and the Red Army's strange, unstoppable tanks multiplied. Wehrmacht had entered a new kind of war, one where technology and terrain conspired against them, and the laughter that once filled the fields of the East had vanished entirely. July 10, 1941, Smolensk front, Western Russia. The morning fog clung low to the ground as Metzger's panzer platoon rolled into position along a battered road, lined with shattered birch trees. Their engines coughed in the cold, wet air. The advance toward Smolensk was slow now, painfully cautious. Gone were the days of lightning thrusts and sweeping every kilometer forward felt like a gamble. Ahead lay reports of another Soviet armored division, this one rumored to field an entire regiment of the new tanks. Otto, his face hollow and eyes rimmed with fatigue, broke the silence inside the cramped turret. They say even the Air Force is struggling to hit them. Bombs just bounce off the top armor. Metzger didn't reply. He adjusted his binoculars and stared toward the horizon where dark shapes shifted through the haze. The Soviets had learned to use their new machines well, hit and run ambushes, brutal counterattacks, and clever camouflage. Every engagement was a nightmare. Then came the rumble, from the tree line ahead. Engines growled deep, resonant, confident. A line of green shadows emerged from the mist, their silhouettes distinct now. Sloped armor, wide tracks, heavy guns. T-34s, whispered Otto. Dozens. The Germans opened fire. The field lit up with the flash of cannon fire, smoke billowing across the grass. Metzger's gun barked repeatedly, shells streaking toward the advancing line only to ricochet off the angled steel like sparks from an anvil. Nothing, Otto shouted. They're just walking through it. One of the Soviet tanks was hit squarely on the turret by a Panzer IV's shell. The round glanced off, tearing into the ground behind. The T-34 responded instantly, its 76 mm gun firing a single shot that turned the German tank into a fireball. Metzger felt the shockwave rattle his own armor. Fall back behind the ridge, he ordered. As the German tanks withdrew, the Soviets pressed on, undeterred by the rain of shells and machine gun fire. They rolled forward relentlessly, their engines roaring like thunder, their treads churning the earth into black mud. From the ridge, Metzger watched in awe and terror. The T-34s seemed alive, resilient, unyielding, as if forged from the land itself. They climbed over obstacles, powered through craters, and turned fields into molten chaos. The once invincible Panzer divisions of the Wehrmacht were now learning humility at the hands of Soviet engineering. Later that night, under the flicker of lantern light, Metzger wrote in his field logbook, "We used to laugh at them, at their tanks, their tactics, their clumsy designs, but today, we learned fear. The T-34 is not just a tank, it is a message. It tells us the Russians will not break." He closed the log, hearing distant artillery echo across the plains. Somewhere beyond the smoke and ruin, Soviet mechanics were already repairing their tanks, readying them for another day of battle. In Berlin, reports from the front began to reach the high command. Engineers pored over photographs and reanalyses. They marveled and panicked. The T-34's sloped armor was revolutionary, its mobility unmatched. Germany's finest minds suddenly found themselves students again, scrambling to learn from their enemy. Soon, design bureaus would begin work on a countermeasure, a new tank that could stand toe-to-toe with the Soviet behemoth. It would take inspiration from the very machine that had humbled them. Its name would become legend, Panther. But for now, on the muddy plains of Russia, that redemption was still far away. As dawn broke, Metzger stood beside his tank, staring east. Columns of smoke twisted into the pale sky. He could hear distant engines again, the same deep, steady growl that haunted his dreams. The T-34 was coming, and this time, no one was laughing. No one was laughing.